Hey, folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, I say this every week, so listeners out there are probably thinking, okay, yeah, you say this every week. But we really do have a special guest today. And I'm going to give you a little bit of actually, you tell us who this guest is because you set this up.
This guest is, he's very special because he used to be our boss. So I guess any former boss is special because he can maybe be your boss again. So you have to be careful. But Robert Huschka, former editor of the Free Press, soccer nut. And I mean nut with a capital N. The guy just got back from the World Cup in Qatar. He's supporting the U.S. He and his wife, Amy, who also works at the Free Press now. They are just the most fanatical people when it comes to U.S. soccer. And I didn't know that there were that many of them, but apparently there's a group that travels around, and Robert's going to tell us about his adventures in Qatar.
Yeah, it's a Grateful Dead for soccer, for sports, right? I mean, or Fish for the more modern crowd, I guess. If you don't want to completely date ourselves, but yeah, and we're going to get to Robert in a little bit here, and he's going to tell us about his adventures and his connection to the U.S. men's team and all that good stuff.
I want to find out from you when we get to Robert, or maybe before then. Like, what are you fanatical about? What's a fringe thing that you're fanatical about still in your early hundreds?
Yeah, right. Yeah, we can talk about that when Robert. When Robert gets and maybe you can share yours. But first, I don't know. We got to get to a little bit of football here, don't we? And I want
which football? Football or football?
American football. Well, American football is also soccer. So
yeah, what are you talking about?
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, we want to talk about the Lions. Obviously, real quickly, the Michigan Wolverines, I think everybody knows, won a Big Ten title. They beat Purdue Saturday night in Indianapolis, and they're going to play TCU on New Year's Eve and out in the desert for the right to go to the national championship and play either Georgia or Ohio State. So there you go. I don't think we're breaking any news with that.
No, but for the record, I want it stated for the record. I wanted to talk about Michigan football, but Shawn knows that we get all the clicks from NFL stuff, so he just wants to talk about the Lions.
No, it's not the clicks. It's not the clicks. No, it's not the clicks. It's like at the downtown department store that sells typewriters, and here comes the IBM, and we're not going to sell IBMs because Carlos back in the back there wants to keep selling typewriters. No. We're gonna the Lions, man. I mean,
typewriters and people don't even know what IBMs are now.
Of course they do. Lions,
does it still exist? Does IBM still exist?
Yeah, that's a good question. International Business Machine, I think, right? Wasn't that it?
I had an uncle who worked for IBM back in the 70s. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
It's paid well.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it did. Oh, the life of luxury you had. No, seriously, let's the Lions, man. What do you think? Can you imagine? And I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but this sounds going crazy. What's the record? 5-7?
5-7, a glorious 5-7.
A glorious 5-7. It might be the happiest 5-7 in the history.
Best damn 5-7 team in the NFL history.
Yeah, I don't ever recall a 5-7 team spreading this much elation. But so you and I got an email. I don't know if you read it. It was addressed to both of us. I think it's a podcast listener. And he described you, and you're writing about this team lately, the Lions I'm talking about, as gushing. And I thought, wow. Has anybody ever described Carlos and a column or any kind of sports story at all as gushing? So tell me and our listeners, why are you gushing? What's going on here?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, if I get on the Shawn Windsor psychobabble psychiatrist couch or whatever, you're going to say I'm doing it for some weird reason. I'm being a contrarian. I don't know. I'm just telling the truth, man. I'm telling the truth like I always tell the truth. I talk about what I see. I make observations. I talk to the coaches and the players. I actually go to the games. Unlike you, Shawn, and you're in the Four Seasons Indianapolis, sleeping in late after covering that Michigan Big Ten champlisten game. And I was actually at the game. So, I mean, listen, man, they've won 4 out of 5. And listen, I said this just to give myself a pat on the back because I need that.
You do that frequently, and that's okay. I do,
and I've said
your hand is sore. You're going to throw your shoulder out though, so you better be careful.
Easy. So that's I've said this all season with the Lions. Other than that Patriots 29-0 loss, they've showed up. Even in the losses, they've showed up. They've been there at the Dallas game. They were there up until the very end, and then they kind of, Cowboys scored a touchdown or whatever, but it made it seem like a worse loss. But they've been right there against every team: the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Vikings, the good teams in the NFL. They just weren't winning. And they were close. And Campbell kept saying that. Dan Campbell kept saying, we're close. And he was right. There's a lot of times where coaches lie or they try to take the most optimistic view, but he really hasn't. And if you watch the games carefully and you pay attention to what they're doing and how they're doing it, and you consider the health of the players at the time and how they were still competing without their full roster, key players out, it made sense. And now they're healthy. And, they made some changes on defense, especially. And it's coming together. Now they haven't exactly, played the greatest teams in the world, but they were right there toe to toe against the Buffalo Bills, who were a great team. And that was their one loss in the last 5 games. So absolutely. I mean, there's nothing. And after this blowout against the Jacksonville Jaguars, how can you not gush about this team?
Well, yeah, 40-14. I mean, when's the last time we saw that kind of score around here where it wasn't the other team hanging at 40, right? I mean, maybe this is why we need Dave Burkett, because, he always has the numbers and the history and the context. But yeah, 40-14 is kind of shocking. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the game at all because, NFL works with, markets. And even though I had my laptop and I have an iPad actually with my own home streaming service, if you're not in the area, it knows, and so it still won't let you watch.
Okay.
And not that I could have watched much anyway, because Michigan had the selection show, and we were all invited to their downtown hotel to watch the show. And then players came over next door. They separated us in this big ballroom, kind of by this wall, where the haves and the have-nots, right? The little media continued. Anyway. So I didn't get to see it. And
well, you know what? Just real quick for Christmas, I know what I'm getting you: a Betamax with the VCR tape, so that you can record the games when you're not home.
Oh yeah, well I could. Yeah, you're right. I guess I could record it and go back and watch. But in any case, and I do that sometimes. But in any case,
record every game. By the way, every single, whether I'm watching it or not, Lions, Michigan State football, every single one, because. You sometimes want to, when you're in the stadium and whatever, you want to watch like that. You don't get to watch the replays as much as you want to. They have some TVs set up, but it's always sometimes like you have to go back and refer to something. Even though we have a subscription to NFL Game Pass and you can watch that stuff and whatever. It's just always easier on the TV, I think, to watch things.
Yeah, it is. And when you go back through, you can kind of speed through it. In any case, I saw highlights and then I read as much as I could about it, but. And one thing I saw was a consistent talk about how bad Jacksonville is, and I get it, but they have the same record coming in as the Lions, right?
Exactly.
They've also been weirdly competitive. Not weirdly, but they've been competitive about with good teams, right? I mean, they were competitive the week before. I can't remember who they played, but with a decent team, right? So it's even though they're at the bottom of the league, they're not an all-time 0-16 kind of team either, right? So to hang 40 and win 40-14 against a team that has been generally competitive and lost some games a lot like the Lions, I think that says even more. Yeah,
I mean, they came in, they beat the Ravens actually the week before the Lions.
Yeah, right.
And the Ravens are a good team. So that was by far their biggest win of the season. And and here's the difference, right? Is the Lions go toe to toe with the Bills on Thanksgiving, their one national game of the year, and they come back and they punch the Jaguars in the mouth and drag them around the field, right? The Jaguars are still a very young team. They're missing a lot of pieces, and on both sides of the ball, and they beat the Ravens, big upset. And then they have a huge letdown. I mean, they barely showed up against the Lions. So that's the sign of a young team that doesn't know how to go from one big moment to the next and keep up that consistent effort, show up, because I'm sure that everybody, all of us Free Press geniuses in the predictions, we all picked the Lions. I don't know if anybody picked 40-14. I think I was close actually, but no. I don't remember. But it was, I expected a sizable victory, but not quite that big. I'm sure you didn't either.
No, not quite like that. No, but it's interesting too that so they're healthy, right? Offensively, especially.
Mm-hmm. Yonder Swift's getting back. He's looking better.
Yeah, no, right. And when he's more part, and then DJ Chark was back. I know he was back the previous game, but he had missed a big chunk of time, and he was a little bit more involved. And it just makes you wonder, Carlos, excuse me, just how. I mean, we saw this kind of offensive output early in the season, and then they started getting injuries. And also, then you can kind of credit, NFL teams adjust; they're very good at that, and that sort of thing. But I just wonder about Jared Goff, because it's the way he played the other day, the way he played the beginning of the season. If they keep winning games, it's going to put them in a interesting spot, right? In terms of the draft, it really kind of. It really is. I'm curious what you think of that. I don't want to say, hey, they're not going to make the playoffs. I mean, obviously it's a long shot, but they're still mathematically, obviously they still have a shot. But I just think that the bigger picture, that's a really interesting thing to think about. What are your thoughts on that?
It's all going to come down to the quarterback who's available, I think. And and a lot of this is going to really hinge on the Rams pick. So if they're able to get CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, if they like them, if they believe that these guys can be the future, the franchise, you have to pick them really. But if they don't, if they miss out on the top 3 picks, whatever, wherever they might go. Dave Burkett and I were just talking about this, and it's like, all right, you take the best defensive lineman available wherever you're picking, 4 or 5, 6, wherever that pick ends up from the Rams. And then maybe you go for a quarterback mid-round somewhere, the Kentucky quarterback. I don't know, Tennessee. I don't know if Hendon Hooker's going to last that long. Who knows where they're going to last, but I think that the good thing about this is that it gives them an option, right? They don't have to draft a quarterback. I would like them to draft a quarterback because let's just be honest. Okay. I mean, listen, there's a lot of hate for Jared Goff. And even though it's abating a little bit, he's not going to win you games. He's just not going to steal games for you. He's a serviceable quarterback. Above average in the NFL at most of the time, still makes some questionable decisions here and there for a quarterback of his, experience level. There's a ceiling with him. I think that he's not gonna elevate your franchise, and I've talked about this, that, the future of the NFL is the mobile quarterback, the dual threat guy. It can, the bigger question really, Shawn, is Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator. Is he not going to get poached for a head coaching job when this guy has proven himself to be this wunderkind? He has a largely starless cast that he's dealing with, other than the offensive line, the skill position guys. There's really no star. No,
but they're good. They're good.
Players. They're solid and they're good. Yeah. But there's no Derrick Henry and there's no amazing receiver or quarterback or whatever.
Yeah, they got a guy who might be a Pro Bowl receiver, and they got a great offensive line, and they've got, when healthy, a really good running back, right? Plus a nice running back. I mean, this team has some talent, right?
Every team has talent. Yes, every team has talent. You look around, there's someone, right? There's very few people teams that don't have something. Amon-Ra St. Brown, yeah, he's going to be a Pro Bowler at some point. He's going to be the next Golden Tate, for sure. But as of now, he's turned them into that. He's resurrected Jared Goff's career. If you want to look at Jared Goff and what he's doing, you have to give Ben Johnson a lot of credit for that. Scoring is down. It's among the lowest scoring in the NFL for league wide for, I don't know what it is, 4, 5, 6 years or something like that. So scoring is a premium. And you have this guy who suddenly has ignited the Detroit Lions somehow, and they're one of the better defense or offenses in the league. If he doesn't get hired as a head coach, I will be shocked. So then you got to deal with a new offensive coordinator. And then what are you doing with Jared Goff? that's a whole nother thing. How are you?
He might get one more year here before, he might need one more year season, but it's not just, but it's not just him, right? Goff's play started to improve when Dan Campbell took over the play calling. So there was that transition period a year ago, which makes you wonder, and obviously they see the game the same way. And I'm with you on that would be a big blow to lose Johnson. But getting back to Goff for a second on the quarterback, first of all, the dual threat, whatever. It's just Joe Burrow is in the Super Bowl and will probably play meaningful football in the winter for on and off for a long, long time. And he's not dual threat. That is not. We are not there yet. And we may not be for another decade, right? So pocket passers are still going to be just fine. Here's my question to you, though. I think of this as sort of a math issue. First of all, of the 32 teams, how many have a generational quarterback? Just think.
Several?
5?
I don't know. I mean, I have to count them up.
I mean, if you can,
somewhere a little more.
Just up the top of your head, I mean, you start with Mahomes and you go to Josh Allen. I'm talking about guys that are younger.
Yeah.
Obviously Brady and Rodgers, but they're kind of at the tail end, right?
But they're still generational quarterbacks, yeah.
They are, but they're at the tail end, right? So but that's 20 years apart almost. So which tells you something too. So
I don't think you have to have a generational quarterback. I'm just saying a guy who's going to be on your team for a second contract,
Yeah, but but I'm talking about somebody who's better than Goff.
Oh, better than Goff?
Yeah, who's going to go win you games at that kind of level, because most other guys can't. I mean, who else is out there? Is
Derek Carr better than Goff?
Is he out there winning games?
I think almost everybody in the NFL will say Derek Carr is a better quarterback than Jared Goff. Now, the whole poop show that's going on in Vegas with that team is a whole another problem with them, and Josh McDaniels and all this other stuff and the firing of Gruden and all that. That franchise is a disaster zone right now. But if you look at them objectively, I think most people would take Derek Carr in a heartbeat, and he's not spectacular.
No, I don't think he's.
But he wins games. I mean, he's smart, he's quick, he's
right. But I don't think he's won as much as Jared Goff, who's been in a Super Bowl and playoff 2 other times, right? So it's
come on.
But he has. But that's the math I'm talking about. That's the reality. There isn't really any difference.
Sean McVay's been in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Here's the problem with Jared Goff, right? Is the indictment is he wasn't good enough for Sean McVay. Sean McVay did not draft him. He inherited him from the previous regime, from Jeff Fisher, and did what he could and did enough to get Jared Goff and that offense to play in the Super Bowl.
No, they had a really good defense too. But what are the Rams doing this year? And I know Matthew Stafford's been hurt lately, but look at what they were doing earlier before he was healthy. It isn't just a quarterback. They as good as Stafford is, and we wouldn't consider him up in the Mahomes category, but he's in that tier just below. Right. I don't know who else was in there at one point. Maybe God, I can't think of his name. The quarterback who was from the Falcons for a long time and went to the Colts.
Matt Ryan.
Yeah, right. So Stafford had a little more arm talent than him, but so those guys that in that area. But if you're talking about just huge difference makers right now, I mean, you maybe Herbert out in San Diego. I mean, Lamar Jackson on and off. Jalen Hurts is starting to become one of these guys.
Oh yeah.
We're talking about a fraction of the league. So the idea that you're going to get one of those guys is minimal. And every year, not every draft produces one of those guys, right? And maybe when a draft does produce one of the guys, maybe sometimes you get a couple of them. It's still of the top guys, it's 50-50 at best that you're going to get the right guy. So if your goal is to win a Super Bowl, what's the most likely way to do that, right? To roll a 50-50 dice on a quarterback, or to look around and say, wow, we are putting a team together and a lot similar to the way not similar, but kind of like the Rams. Actually, they put a really good team around, got to the Super Bowl with Goff, and then won one with Stafford. Neither one of those are elite quarterbacks, right? So to me, that's what's difficult about it, because you don't have to have Mahomes to get to the Super Bowl.
You don't have to, but it certainly helps. And I'm not even talking about the Super Bowl. I'm just talking about, very the next step for them is to become a consistent playoff team, a division champion, to win the NFC North for the first time, right? to take that next step, to have the quarterback. Basically, you had that in Stafford. You had that level of quarterback in Stafford. To find someone of that caliber. And I don't think Goff is at Stafford's caliber. So you need. Lamar Jackson hasn't played in the Super Bowl, but he would certainly be the guy that you would look at as this is the guy who can get us to the playoffs. He's obviously been in the playoffs and won in the playoffs, and can he get you to that next level? Yeah, they have every confidence. He's going to be a free agent, and you're going to see them pay him really well because he's the answer there. So you're always going to be limited. And listen, if the Lions had this amazing defense, if it was like, oh man, this thing is a monster, and Levi Onwuzurike was a 10-sack guy, and Aleem McNeil was a 10-sack guy, and Romeo Cora was healthy, and Jeff Okuda had 10 picks, and all this stuff. If this was a growling monster of a defense, like, yeah, maybe this is the identity. The identity of this team right now is offense. It is an offensive team, and I guarantee you they regret trading TJ Hawkinson.
But you got they just scored 40 points, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they did, but against the Bills, he would have helped win that game for the Bills. They don't. Maybe
not. They couldn't make a stop, right? Right. I don't know that Hawkinson. They were not winning games with Hawkins because of the defense. And you got to project. You got to look. What do they have on defense? They have some promising young guys, a fair amount of them, and 5 or 6 of them. And so you got to project. Okay, how good are these guys going to get? And do we want to go get? Not that I don't think the Rams. We'll see if the Rams loosen up, but do you want to go out and get Jalen Carter, right? Who's as freakish a defensive lineman as that's been in the draft in the last several years. He's a Sue type of guy in terms of, I know he's a tackle, he's a fine run stopper, but the pressure he puts up the middle, which is the most effective kind of pressure, is ridiculous. And that was Sue, right? Sue was a single-handed destructive force up the middle. Do you want to take the chance and say, let's go get somebody like that with all these other young guys? We got fairly decent youth on offense, and go that way. It's tricky. They're going to have a really, because what's the end game? Are you trying to build a dynasty, or do you want to try to get to the Super Bowl?
I think you want to try to win some games and get to the playoffs. Forget about dynasty and Super Bowl right now. You want to just win some games and become a consistent team with an identity, and the wins are going to come as they come. But the Jaguars had the number 1 pick in the draft, Trayvon Walker. How much did he help them against the Lions? The guys don't catch fire right away.
Trevor Lawrence is supposed to be a generational quarterback.
Right.
What's he doing?
How much did he help them? Right. It takes time, and it's all holistic. It doesn't work one way, but the Lions are lucky, and that right now they know that the offense is a strength of the team. Now that is maybe going to change if they lose Ben Johnson, but for now, that's the strength. So how do you strengthen make a strength even stronger? And you obviously have to draft on defense too. You can't just ignore, one side of the ball. But I'm just saying that you have to look carefully at this. And I think it will, if you're going to play this game of like, well, what happens in the, I would say yes. If this team, if Goff keeps playing this way and he's done enough to prove, that he shouldn't just be, kicked out. If Ben Johnson returns, it would be hard to go away from Jared Goff because they've worked well together. You don't want to stab him in the back by, basically drafting his replacement, and that can be problematic. I can see that. However, if Ben Johnson doesn't return, that changes a lot of things. But also they have to be willing at some point. You have to draft another quarterback because there is a ceiling on Jared Goff. There just is. I don't think.
And what's the ceiling?
The ceiling is that he can win you some games.
The ceiling is he's played in a Super Bowl. So that's the ceiling. What's a more ceiling than that? And they lost by a single score. And I know he didn't do anything because they were playing against a great defense. Right. So maybe that's the ceiling. What, he's just a Super Bowl quarterback?
The ceiling is that
there is no ceiling. He's played the Super Bowl.
He needs a lot of help to get there.
And on
both sides of the ball.
And so does just about every other quarterback.
Well, how many games has he stolen for the Lions? How many games has he just taken control, taken over, and just gone nuts? The way that even you see Justin Fields, the way that he kind of takes control of a game, even though they may not win the game, he impacts the game significantly. Jalen Hurts does, Josh Allen does, Mahomes, all these guys, right? Yeah, even Aaron Rodgers still does.
That's a different level. Fields didn't there yet. He doesn't throw the ball that way. And Goff led one of the best drives you'll see all season, at least from the Lions, to beat the Bears. He just didn't do it with his legs. So don't fall in love with his legs. But you're talking about those.
I can fall in love with any part I want.
Those other guys are elite players, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. So, he's not an elite player. At some point, see, to get to the playoffs and to win in the playoffs, you need elite play in your quarterback. It's rare that you're going to win games in the playoffs unless you have some really elite side. I mean, when
was Stafford at the same level as Mahomes and Rodgers and Brady?
Last year he should have been the Super Bowl MVP. He played great.
No, he did play great.
Yes. Listen, he was a pick away. The Jaquizy Tart drop. He was a pick away from not, getting to the Super Bowl, right? So yeah, that's understandable. But also, Jared Goff was also a bad call away in New Orleans from not. He shouldn't. The Rams shouldn't have gotten to the Super Bowl.
That happens every year. But at my point,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
that happens every year. I mean, you got to have some luck too.
You got to have some luck.
I mean, even when Brady's
Stafford played great. Stafford played great in the playoffs last year.
Think about the Super Bowls Brady won. I mean, they almost never blew. I don't think they ever blew anybody out. Not in the Super Bowl. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know that they ever had a single. Yeah. So you got to have a little bit of fortune.
Yeah, but you have to play well. You can't very well. There's I don't know. You could go back at the passer ratings and check them out.
If the team really stinks, go get your quarterback, take your chance. But with what we're seeing right now, and if they keep this up the rest of the year, they're really going to have a tough time saying, you know what, we have this team and we've got a lot of young guys. We think we can be better next year. Let's supplement that and then see where it takes us. I mean, it's not going to be a slam dunk to go get a quarterback if they keep playing this way. That's my only point.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a slam dunk. And I think that, I mean, personally, it feels to me that there's a certain I don't get the sense that Brad Holmes has that sort of boldness built into his drafting DNA. And that is that it requires a bold move because like what we're talking about.
Why do you say that? What are you basing that on? He took Jameson Williams.
He went up and got Jameson Williams.
ACL injury, untraded.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, what do you mean he's not? What are you basing that on?
I'm basing that on that, he's not, he's built a lot of, he's taken a lot of linemen early. And I understand, their philosophy of the trenches, which you love. Obviously that's,
I like skill guys.
Yeah. You like big, beefy, slow, fat guys.
I like skill guys, but skill guys don't mean a thing if you can't control the line of scrimmage. I mean, football is still that way.
It's that way for.
We saw that Ohio State at Michigan. Ohio State had a lot more skill, and they got bullied. Right? Yeah. I mean, it's still that way. Georgia, that's why they are the way they are.
I think that in college, it's definitely a little more true. In the NFL, you got a lot of guys who can block and stuff, and you definitely don't want a bad offensive or defensive line, but you don't have to draft these guys super high. I think there's a way to do that. But the Jameson Williams thing, I mean, that was one where he took a risk. Finally, he did something a little bit different.
What do you mean? Finally, you act like he's been drafting for 5 or 6 years. In
the limited time that we had in the 2 years, I haven't seen him really go out. And the Jameson Williams was an interesting choice, definitely a risk. But for the most part,
thing with Pascal,
I think he's gone with safer guys.
I don't think Pascal was safe. I don't think you mentioned Levi earlier. I don't know that he was safe. I mean, you might argue the opposite, that he's got some kind of fetish for guys that have coming off of injuries in their last year of college, right?
He has that too,
and that's really
that's
risky.
A weird kind of risk that he takes, but
but it's still a risk. You're talking about a very specific thing with the quarterback, and we'll see. We'll see. I think they traded for Jared Goff for picks to build the team out and buy time. And now the time's going to come, and we'll see if he sticks his neck out or not.
That's the thing is, like, I think when he traded T.J. Hawkinson, his message is kind of like, this is going to take some time, and we need to acquire more draft capital, and we need to, I think he was almost pumping the brakes on saying, don't expect too much right away or next year even, because we're gonna have to take our time to do this a certain way, to build this team a certain way. And it almost signaled to me like that they don't expect to make the playoffs this year for sure, but then next year, possibly even next year. Because let's face it, once you make the playoffs or start trying to make the playoffs, the clock speeds up on the regime, and you better produce. You have to start challenging for the division title. You have to start making playoffs. And once you don't, then jobs are on the line.
No, for sure. That's how it always works. And Hawkinson is he's a good player, really good player. But, he didn't block well enough, and he had weird
It's not
drops.
a blocker.
No, I know, but
Never.
But he's not versatile, and he had weird drops from time to time. Obviously, I thought he was fun to watch because he ran routes really well, and when he did catch, he made some spectacular ones. But I don't think they were giving up; they just wanted picks. I think they liked their young guys, and they were figured out. Getting back to your guy Ben Johnson, that they were going to spread the ball in different areas, right? And so far, it's working out all right. Hey, we've talked way too long. We need to take a quick break, and we got to get to Mr. Huschka.
Yes.
All right. Let's take a quick break, pay some bills, and we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, it's time to talk about your favorite sport.
Hockey? No, highlight.
Baseball?
Wushu. How about wushu?
I just want to say that I'm impressed for somebody that does not like football, as it's known in the rest of the world, or soccer as we call it, to reach out to our next guest and bring him in, knowing that this was going to be the topic of conversation. I'm impressed. That shows that you're thinking about other people. It shows a level of empathy, I think, that maybe your readers don't always see.
I've always admired soccer. I played adult league soccer, and it's just always been hard for me to watch. I do enjoy World Cup soccer, and that's why I hope that we can talk to Robert about this. But it's the one true world sports tournament, right? It's the only tournament in the world where everybody competes in this sport, pretty much, with rare exception, that really the whole world gets into it. Unlike, we call the World Baseball World Series the World Series. It's not.
It's pretty arrogant, actually, to call it that.
It is, yeah. Which is what makes it great, right? total American.
That's what we do, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, let's get Robert in here, who apparently took some kind of luxury cruise. Is this true, Robert? This is how Carlos characterized it earlier, that you were sailing across the sand and eventually found water, and you found your way back from. Can you clarify, by the way, because I saw a story recently in the New York Times about the pronunciation, whether it's Qatar or, as locals say, Qatar.
Yeah, I think it is actually Qatar. So Qatar, because the T is part of the first syllable. At least that's how most of the locals down in that part of the world seem to pronounce it. So Qatar.
Okay. So
repeat after me, Shawn. Qatar.
Qatar. No, that's where the paper fell that was, but then, I've heard, so Copenhagen, for example, I know folks in Denmark say something I can't even pronounce to say Copenhagen, like Schopenhag. I don't know. I don't want to keep butchering it.
By the way, there was almost a fist fight in the Free Press Sports Department when they had the Olympics in Italy, the Torino or Turin. We couldn't decide how. It almost fractured the whole sports department.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a bitter argument.
So tell us, Robert, how long were you over there, and when did you get back, and what was it like?
Yeah, so my wife and I, Amy Huschka, who you may have mentioned, works at the Free Press with you guys, as I once did not long ago. Went over just before the tournament began. So we flew over, went on a 30 hours of plane rides from Detroit on November 20th. We arrived early on November 20th and stayed throughout the U.S. group stage games. And we flew back, must be Thursday of last week. So we were there through December 2nd. So we saw all of the 3 U.S. group stage games, but left before. We had good timing and left before the loss to Netherlands.
Oh, so you didn't stay for the Netherlands?
We really debated it. We sat there, we had a ticket actually, but just both cost and timing, and I had to work this week, and it takes a little bit of recovery time from both being at a World Cup for 2 weeks and the 30 hours of travel home, discretion was the better part of valor, and we returned before the Netherlands match.
Were you secretly kind of rooting for them to lose? Because if you had passed up a chance to watch them beat Holland, I mean, like, could you forgive yourself?
No, there was no scenario where I was ever going to root for them to lose. I'm still not over that loss, actually. So there was no. We were up early, sitting on the couch. We also managed to get COVID on the trip, so we're recovering slowly from COVID. But a risk we were willing to take.
You'll have to forgive Carlos, Robert, for thinking that somebody actually doesn't make it about themselves. What do you mean? What do you mean? Is he's this man
to kick yourself to miss that?
US
I mean, when's the last time they advanced past the first round? Oh my God, the knockout stage.
2002, Carlos, you and I watched that game, in fact, with the U.S.-Mexico game in 2002. You came over to my house. It was a 4 a.m. kickoff, and we watched the U.S. beat Mexico, and that was the last time they were out of the round
20 years. 20 years.
Yep.
I think it was. I remember it as a fever dream. I can't even. Was Christoph Furman's there? Were we all?
I don't know. Chris Klontz was there. If you remember that name. My brother was there. It was a good time.
So Robert, for our listeners, what the fascination, not the fascination, just the obsession. That's a better word for it. With soccer, and specifically with the U.S. men's soccer team, where did it come from, and how many games did I read that you've been to? 100 plus games? Is that right?
In Qatar, the U.S.-Iran match was my 152nd U.S. men's national team game.
And you've been all over the world, right?
Yeah, that was my must have been my fifth continent I've seen the team play on. So yeah, upwards of 20 countries, 152 full U.S. men's matches. I've been to a bunch of women's and youth matches as well, but just the full squad U.S. team, 152 games. So
you're like a Grateful Dead fan, and I don't know what you're substituting for the acid, but what's
beer with soccer,
is it
which was hard to come by in Qatar.
How did this come? Because it come about. It's one thing to enjoy watching it on TV, like my neighbors do, by the way, from Amsterdam, and we're not as torn as they should have been, considered they've been here for 25 years. Anyway, where does this come from? This obsession, I guess.
Yeah, we had back in the day, still working at the Free Press, we had a graphic artist come in from Scotland, a guy named Richard Johnson, and he decided, and Carlos played on this team with me, that he was going to start a Free Press soccer team, and he dragged us all out to Belle Isle and started kicking soccer balls at us. And that was about the same time as the U.S. was going through World Cup qualifying. I started watching games ahead of the 2002 World Cup. And I went to a game in D.C. on just before September 11th. So this was September 4th, I think, 2001. I saw a World Cup qualifier between USA and Honduras. This game was played at 10 in the morning, because at that time, that was the only time U.S. soccer could get on national TV. So it was, but I got to that game at 8 o'clock, and the entire parking lot was filled with Honduran fans. It was like a sea of Honduran blue. It was like the craziest energy. And I've been to big sporting events. I've been to an NFC championship game. I'd seen NBA playoff games. This thing was electric. And even for a 10 a.m. kickoff, right? And the game kicks off. I'm behind the goal. The place is full of Honduran fans. Like, stuff is being thrown left and right. Literally, flares were thrown on the field, and they don't stop the game. They keep playing. And the U.S. scored an early goal in that match, right in our goal. And it was like, that was it. I was done. I was a fan since that moment. The U.S. actually ended up losing that game, which also may have something to do with it. That all sports is always bred with pain and suffering. True fandom is born out of pain. That stood as the U.S.'s last home World Cup qualifier for almost 15 years, actually more than 15 years, I think. So, and then it just began. My wife and I went to a game. I dragged my crazy wife into this. We went to a game. Her first game was actually in Mexico City in the famed Estadio Azteca, which is Mexico's fortress, holds 100,000 Mexican fans. We went there in 2005. That was the first time we left the country to see a game. And we met people there who sort of were like you said, Shawn, Grateful Dead fans of soccer who just did this, who travel from game to game. There's a cadre of people we see everywhere. When they show fans on TV, U.S. soccer fans on TV, we can usually pick out people we know. And like, hey, there's Dale. So it just becomes part of sort of a traveling family, so to speak, that wanders around the globe.
Now, so most sensible U.S. soccer fans find the most tenuous connection to some national background in their family. Like, my family's German, whatever. I think there's some English or somewhere or Dutch, and they'll find like a good team, a good international team to hook onto, right? But you willingly chose basically the Detroit Lions of international soccer as a full functioning adult. Yeah. I mean, is it just like this glutton for punishment? I mean, why couldn't you just pick a different team, Robert?
Well, one, I would argue that the U.S. soccer is probably in a better position, has somewhat more success over the last 20 years than the Detroit Lions. But there's something about the underdog story of it. There's something where the United States is often viewed as the big bad superpower around the world. This is the one thing the United States can come in and be the underdog at. And there's a special place there. There's also just something about being, part of the world community in this, in a way. I mean, I can meet people from all over the world as a language you can share. You can talk about, the different players you've seen, the different leagues you've watched. It's, in my new job in the robotics industry, I deal with people from a lot of different countries, and they're always sort of fascinated with an American who is interested in their sport. It's sort of an instant global conversation starter.
So now, this group of fans, sorry, Carlos, this group of fans, they're known as the American Outlaws?
That's one of the U.S. soccer supporter groups. It's the one I belong to. There were groups that predated that, but they've been around now for 15 years. They claim almost 20,000 members globally, but the group that obviously travels like we do is far smaller. That makes it to as many games as we do.
Go ahead, Carlos. Sorry.
Just a quick question, and I believe this is true. I could be wrong about this, but you don't actually root for like a professional soccer team, right? You don't really follow or root for somebody.
I've been a Fulham fan in the English Premier League for a long time, so it surely shows my desire to get my teeth repeatedly kicked in this sport. Fulham, most people who don't follow sport probably don't know, is a smaller team in South London. For a while, they had about 5 Americans there when I was first becoming a fan, so it was one of the reasons I clung on to them. The 2 of the Americans on this U.S. team both play at Fulham. Tim Ream and Anthony Robinson both were Fulham players, continuing that long tradition of Americans at Fulham.
So let me ask you this: you like the American soccer team better or the Minnesota Vikings?
I would say that's always a tough call, but I would certainly. I mean, I always assumed the Minnesota Vikings would win a Super Bowl in my lifetime. As I've gotten older, I cling to less of that hope. I don't expect we'll ever see the U.S. win a World Cup in my lifetime, and we can talk about that, but we're too far removed yet from the top tier of the sport. So if I had to choose, I would certainly choose the U.S. winning a World Cup over the Vikings winning the Super Bowl if I had to make that choice, because one is so much farther away than the other. Especially when you look at, if you watched games this week, right? Teams like the Netherlands, Portugal today won 6-1. Portugal has never won a World Cup. Netherlands has never won a World Cup. This idea that the U.S. can step into this with our still relatively immature soccer culture and suddenly compete for World Cups, we're still a far ways removed from that.
You were talking about this the supporter group and and the community of it, and it really is a lot like a family too. I mean, they took. From my understanding, this group really took your son in, Martin, who you just decided, hey, we're going to go. I can't remember some of the Ireland. I'm trying to remember some of the other.
Yeah, we went to Ireland.
Jamaica.
We went to Amsterdam.
Jamaica, is that right?
Trinidad, actually.
Trinidad, sorry.
We just dragged him across the world with us, and he didn't go to a ton of games. He just sort of got dragged along with with a family member, a babysitter in tow. But whenever he did go to a game, they always made sure he was comfortable. The team, had, right after he was diagnosed, and for those who don't know, our son had a terminal brain disease. They brought us back in the locker room. He has a picture taken with dozens of players over the years. When he died last year, U.S. Soccer, they took one of their World Cup qualifiers in Austin. They actually had a tribute for him. They put his face up on the big screen. They had a wreath in the stands for him. Those are the type jersey with his name on it. And then the craziest thing was when they released the roster about an hour before the game, and on the roster they included Martin on the roster for that game. So, that's the kind of thing that I don't think, you talk about the Minnesota Vikings. I don't think I've ever seen an NFL team do anything like that.
No, it's not.
It's not the connection between soccer and its fans. And I think, Carlos knows this with some of his knowledge of the sport, is unlike what you see in American professional sports. The clubs and their fans are tied in a way that you mentioned it's family. In some countries, it's like a religion. It is caked into their life in a very different way.
The only thing, and I know Carlos has a question, but to me, and I always tell people this from my experience, it's most like our college football in terms of identity. And you mentioned religion. You've spent any time in the South, what college football, right? So it's very similar. Your who you are and how you think about yourself is wrapped up in, at least in part, to your fandom. Yeah, and that's intense. You mentioned the Hondurans filling up the stadium in DC, right? And kind of giving you a bug. It's similar to walking to Columbus, for Michigan, Ohio State, and that it's that feeling of almost anarchy.
Yeah. You walk into you want to experience. Yeah, I remember wearing a Vikings jersey into the Silverdome, right? And people said, "You're crazy! I can't believe you're going to wear a Vikings jersey into the Silverdome." And I said, "I've worn a U.S. jersey into Estadio Azteca in Mexico City." So where you're literally walked in a riot police corridor. They surround you. They basically put you in a cage to separate you from other fans. The wall of riot police just is there all the time. It is a much different experience than even, I would say, going into Philly wearing a New York Giants jersey.
And how, you had a really, really cool post about your experience on Facebook. And you talked about meeting a fan from Iran. And he asked, have you ever been to our country? And you said, I don't know any American who's ever been to your country. Yeah. And you had a nice little exchange, and it was hopeful. What was the reception like, in that part of the world for Americans? Because I'm sure you're wearing your colors loud and proud. Everybody knows, Yeah,
I didn't encounter. One of the things I've always loved about a World Cup is the sort of United Nations of culture that gets put together, and the ability to strike up a conversation with people you never would have met from all over the world. And I had and still do real concerns about hosting this tournament in Qatar because of the bribery scandal that brought it there, and the human rights concerns in that country. But I've always believed that bringing people together from different parts of the world has to have value. And just this small conversation with someone who lived outside of Tehran, where we could have a conversation about the game, and he could say, "I wish things were better between our countries," and we could shake each other's hands and say, "Safe journey." It may have changed his perception of how he views Americans, and that may be just a small drop in the ocean of discontent between Iran and the United States. But somehow that's how change begins, with small drops in an ocean.
Beat that, Shawn.
What's that?
Beat that thought.
No. But that's you're right. That's part of it. I mean, we learn to me, it comes down to, it doesn't have to be food. Carlos always gives me a hard time, but when we eat together,
it always has to be food.
If we eat together, if we worship together sometimes, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be that either, but if we just are sitting next to each other, and that's really the key, right? Because if you're thinking about another human being through your computer screen or your phone mostly, then it's very different. All the nuance is lost, and I'm sure you learned a lot in that visit. with this man, right?
Yeah. Oh, and just wandering about. When am I ever I've never been to the Middle East. I never, walked that part of the world before. Walked through the market, ate the food. Wandered out into the desert. Spoke to Qataris. Right. The ability to sort of walk in the places of the world where other people walk, teaches you some things, right? And that's one of the other joys I've always loved about following this sport is the places it's taken me. Who'd have ever, before I began, when we started this 20 years ago, who'd have ever thought I'd gone to Guatemala City or Cape Town, South Africa, or walked the streets outside the Kremlin in Moscow, right? There are these places you never thought you would have gone, and Qatar would be one of them that soccer has taken me. And that to me is one of the greatest values of following the sport.
And it gives you a different kind of entry into those places, right? When you're coming with, there's a purpose. You're not just wandering by, walking the earth by yourself, right? You're with another group of people. And so the camaraderie is different and so forth, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with 152 caps, tell us your favorite World Cup venue, and even among the qualifiers, whatever, your favorite stadium to attend a game.
So stadiums here in the United States, right? It's crazy because 20 years ago. Yeah, but let's just think about it this way. Right?
Okay.
When I started watching the sport 20 years ago, there was one soccer-specific stadium in the United States, right? That was Columbus Crew Stadium, which no longer exists. It's being turned into a high school football field or something, right? And now there are something like 10, 12, 15 stadiums in this country built specifically to house soccer teams in places you never would have guessed. If you'd have told me there was going to be a soccer-specific stadium in St. Paul, Minnesota, I would have thought you were crazy, right?
Or Orlando.
Or Kansas City, or Nashville, Tennessee, right? You talk about the Deep South embracing soccer, right? It's crazy. And all of those stadiums are amazing. The stadium in Minneapolis is beautiful. The stadium in Kansas City is great. I've been to some big historic stadiums too. Allianz Arena outside of Munich is fantastic. The most unique stadium, though, was Soccer City outside Johannesburg, which was built for that particular World Cup. And it looks like it was designed to look like one of the bowls used by the cultures in that part of the world. And it has sort of this, unique color and unique vibe to it. And that was a great stadium. Al Bayt Stadium in Qatar is built to look like a big Arabian tent, and it's inflated much like the Silverdome was inflated with air to keep it upright. But it's just this amazing tribute to Arabian culture that they built on the edge of the desert there, north of Doha.
And your favorite World Cup to attend?
They're all different. It's like picking your kids a little bit.
Shawn has favorite kids. He has his favorites. He could tell you right now.
Each World Cup has its own sort of flavor. 06 was our first in Germany. The United States didn't perform particularly well there, but it was a fantastic experience. 2 weeks in Germany. Cape Town in South Africa is one of the most amazing cities I've ever been to. I would encourage that. In Brazil, we spent 2 weeks on a beach in Natal, in northern Brazil, which is one of the most gorgeous beaches I've ever been on. And, Qatar, as I said, I'd never been to the Middle East before, and it was the best shawarma I'll probably ever have. So
yeah, now you're talking my language. So where did you enjoy? Can you give me a couple of the highlights of the food, some of the food you've eaten? Please?
What's interesting is I've gotten asked about it a lot, but I would say this: it was not as different, the food, from what you would expect if you went to Dearborn and ordered really great Middle Eastern food. I was expecting, like if you go to Asia, I've never been to China, but people say you go to China and order Chinese food. It's nothing like American Chinese food, right? Or even, French, going to a French bistro here is very different to going someplace outside of Paris. But I would say the food was like the best version of Detroit Middle Eastern food you could eat, great shawarma, great hummus, really, really great, lamb dishes. You would love it, Shawn. You should definitely go just for the food alone. Now, you can't have a drink along with anything.
No, right.
That's the downside is, we were fortunate. We stayed on one of the cruise ship hotels that they had parked in the harbor, and those were operating under European rules, so we were able to easily drink there. But once you wandered into the city itself, it was very difficult to find a drink, especially at some of the more traditional dining establishments.
So, but my other quick question though is, where have you enjoyed eating the most of all your travels?
That's really interesting. I would say I remember in Guatemala City. After a match, we ordered. We didn't know what we were ordering. I don't speak very good Spanish. My Spanish is like "cerveza, por favor," right? It's my equivalent of my Spanish. And they brought out like and our friend group still refers to as the tray of meat, which was just like every meat you could imagine that had been grilled on this tray, the size of a table. Still just like hot off the grill. In fact, on these heating stones, you just eat it right off this grill. And it was amazing.
Oh, that sounds great. Eh, Carlos?
It does sound great. If you ever take me to Guatemala City, Shawn, I'm sure you're going to take me to Taco Bell and tell me it's authentic.
I'll take you to an Applebee's.
Oh, that'll be great.
Yeah, that's more your speed. Well, listen, Robert, thank you so much for spending some time with us and sharing your experiences. It's really, really incredible how soccer's opened up this world, literally, no pun intended, open up the world to you, right?
Yeah, it's been a blast. I appreciate it, guys. Keep doing great work. I will catch up with you soon.
All right, talk to you soon. Take care. Carlos, we need to take one more quick break here and then come back, and you can tell me what your favorite thing is.
Sounds good.
Does that sound good? All right. We'll be right back with Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn.
Hello, I'm Phil Friend, the host and producer of Spartan Speak, a podcast collaboration between the Detroit Free Press and Lansing State Journal focusing on Michigan State sports. Each week, I'm joined by the OGs of the MSU podcasting game, Freak beat writer Chris Laurie and LSJ sports columnist Graham Couch, as we discuss and dissect the latest sports news coming out of East Lansing. Not only is Spartan Speak one of, if not the longest-running MSU sports podcast out there, you won't find a show with two people as clued into the Spartans as Chris and Graham, each of whom have spent a decade-plus covering MSU and bring years of institutional knowledge and insight to the podcast. And once in a while, they'll let me throw out a take as well. Along with discussing the latest news, we'll break down the Spartans' last game on the hardwood and the gridiron. What went right? What went wrong? Jet sweep. Again? For both Mel Tucker and Tom Izzo, get you ready for the next game, make predictions, and so much more. We can also guarantee at least one reference to Kalamazoo every podcast. So if you haven't already, download, subscribe, and listen to Spartan Speak on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on your podcast app of choice.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Carlos, it's that time of the show. It's time for your favorite thing. And then I will piggyback on that.
You're going to steal it as usual.
It's more of a borrowing. It's more of
borrowing.
You're lending a little bit. You're guiding me. You know what I mean? It's you're showing me the way. It's like God kind of blowing glitter from the palm of his hand, right? Lighten it up for me. You know what I mean?
Showing you the way. Yes. All right. Mine is simple. And it all starts with eggnog, Shawn, your favorite drink, I'm sure. People kind of fall on either side of it, but I really, really love eggnog. And it signals the start of the holiday season, the Christmas season. And in all this bleakness in the winter in Detroit and the Midwest, you got gray days. Something nice happened is you can see once we get to December, right after Thanksgiving, some people complain about, people putting up their lights too early for Christmas and all this stuff. But I've always enjoyed it. It's been one of my favorite seasons. And there's just a nicer attitude among people, I think. I happened to go to Home Depot to return something last week. And normally in the return line at Home Depot, it's one of the most hateful places on the planet. People are angry, they're impatient. And there were like about 6 of us in line, and everybody was having a nice little chat. There was a dad with his young daughter behind me, and they were talking about going to dinner and seeing their family or friends. And you can just sense the turn in people's, I think, outlook. Where I live in Grosse Pointe, they really do a nice job with the lights on the streets, Mack Avenue and Kercheval Avenue. They dress it up. They put the holly out. They put the lights out. Some of the businesses put bows around their businesses. It's just they put the little covers on the parking meter so that it's free for almost all of December. You don't have to pay for parking on the streets. There's just a little bit of a nicer festive feeling that you get, and it comes at the right time, and I've just always looked forward to this, and I always look forward to it coming. And I always kind of forget when it starts, because you always kind of think, oh, closer to late December, but actually I don't know if it's the shopping season that's part of it, but right after Black Friday, people just seem to be in the mood. So I hope it continues, and I've enjoyed it so far, Shawn.
That's great. So you're celebrating a man going down a chimney, passing out presents, and eggnog. No, that's great. That's great. Actually, I love the holiday season too, and I like that you're looking outward. I am not going to do that this time. I'm going to do something a little bit different. I don't normally do this. I don't really even like to do this, but I was thinking about this the last few days. I mean, not the whole time, but I've thought about this on and off. So we mentioned Michigan and Ohio State earlier. Excuse me. Yeah, we did mention that earlier, but we mentioned the Big Ten title game earlier. Sorry, in Indianapolis, where Michigan played Purdue, and it was an 8:00 kick. It was on Fox, and I don't know. It was the longest first quarter in the history of college football, which was really something. And it's funny. I could see on social media people were wanting to throw their televisions out the window because there were so many commercial breaks, I guess, and long commercial breaks.
Well, Tony Garcia was tweeting. He sounded like he was going to leave the game. He was so upset.
Oh yeah, it's funny. It's funny. In any case, it's still, they put on a good show, good scene, all that. So it's an 8:00 kick. It lasts a long time. So it's not done till midnight. Right. And, or so maybe a little even after that. And you're done with the interviews after 1. And not to get too much into how the sausage is made at the Free Press, but we're in an interesting space, right? As a media company, and all print newspapers are kind of stuck between, not stuck, but we're between print. We're still doing some print. We're mostly digital. We're kind of going towards all digital sooner or later. Right. And what it's done is change to a degree, especially in sports, where the news, it happens in the evening too, and that could affect this also. But it's changed a little bit how we think about the news cycles, along with social media and everything being instant and so forth. So, Carlos, I'm sitting there, and I'm working on a column off the game, and I need to file it right at, and then I'm going to tweak it a little bit after the interviews. And I know it's not for print. It's way too late. The printing deadline is long since passed. So you're thinking, okay, what can you write? And, normally you look at the game, you think about the ramifications. Maybe there's a larger context. I usually try to put something in a little bit of context, unless the game is so thrilling itself, then that's just what you focus on. In any case, the next day, the NCAA had its selection show for the college football playoff, and that started at noon Eastern time. It's going to be done about 1. So there was a brief moment late Saturday night, early Sunday evening, where it looked like, at least a possibility that Michigan would have to play Ohio State again. And so I thought, I'm going to write about that. And then J.J. McCarthy, the quarterback, actually sort of jokingly said, hey, I'd love to see them boys again. And so you're thinking, Carlos, if I write about Michigan and Ohio State, that possibility, and I have a little fun with that, it will be completely irrelevant the next day at probably 12:30. So you're writing a column for a digital space that's going to be relevant for about 6 hours, as opposed to 24, and then can even stay right. And we're trained, and I don't want to be too much inside of baseball, but just when you think about stories and what's going to be relevant, and you can attest to this, Carlos. Normally, you want to write a column that at least is somewhat what we call in this business evergreen, where it's going to last a little bit and it won't become irrelevant because of the changing news cycle. And so that's a dilemma, because I knew, Carlos, if you write about and tackle that, there was the potential for lots of interest, but a very, very short window of it. And so my normal self would be, in the past, I would usually err on the safe side. Let's do what's evergreen. And for once in my life, Carlos, I thought, no, this is what people, this is, and help the McCarthy talked about it too, but I thought, no, I'm going to just lean into this and we're going to see what happens. We're going to experiment a little bit, and it ended up working a little bit. And so it's just and the column was whatever, neither here nor there, the way it was written. But the idea ended up being okay, and it's just a reminder that it's okay to try something different a little bit. And I hate to make it about work. I don't normally do that, but it's
love
okay.
Hearing about this.
It's okay to stick your neck out, and it made me feel, to be honest with you, and I was joking with our sports editor about this. It made me feel a little bit like I was working at some marketing, advertising agency where you're surgically trying to pinpoint something. And I don't know that we always want our business to be like that, but the world is changing on us and everything, and we react so quickly to so many different things, and we're trying to adapt to that. And I felt like, and I know it's just a football game, but I felt like in that moment, for the first time that I can remember, we said, all right, we're going to write something that's specifically designed for this tiny little window and see what happens. And it ended up working. And, not because of necessarily the way I wrote it, but just because we tapped into what people were, because Michigan fans were freaking out. Oh my God, we're going to have to play Ohio. There's a chance we're going to have to see Ohio State again. And so I wanted to tap into that a little bit. In any case, that was my favorite thing, was saying, hey, let's try something different in a way that I don't normally.
Did you run it by our boss, Kirkland Crawford? Or did you just go rogue and do what you want to do like you usually do?
I went rogue, and
Kirkland was like, what the hell is this, when you filed it?
Rogue. Well, no. So, okay, in fairness, I went rogue and filed when the game is over, knowing that I could come rewrite it and write something different in case he didn't, you know what I mean? So we'd have something up there for an hour. No, until I filed it. And then I called him afterwards and said, after the interviews, and I said, hey, JJ McCarthy said this. I think we should lean into this all the way with what I've already written, and I'll update it. And I know it's only going to be relevant for. And he said, let's try it. Let's try it. Let's go.
Yeah, because it's 1 a.m. He doesn't care anymore at that point.
No. Because that's not what at all. So he was totally cool with it. And our sports editor is. He's willing to take chances. He encourages us to be as creative as possible. Not that I'm not creative like you, but in any case,
yeah, of course,
no.
Well, that's great. You listen to your gut, Shawn. That's good. I congratulate you.
But you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. We talk about this all the time in the press box. We're always going back and forth on what do you think, and should we do this and should we do that?
Yeah, because it's. You a lot of times want to do what's safe, not because it's easy, but because you want to do what's right. You want to right. So it's just harder stepping into the unknown. And that may seem like no big deal. Yeah, it's a football game. You're right. And who cares? But it's all relative.
I think one of the things that one of my favorite lines in a movie about journalism is Helen Mirren. She plays an editor at a newspaper in the movie State of Play with Russell Crowe and Ben Affleck.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Russell Crowe is like, we're going to be wrong if we write this and whatever. And she says, you know what? We're going to write it and then maybe we'll be wrong. But guess what? The next day we get a chance to write it again and then we'll be right. So let's, it's a daily newspaper. And in fact, that was even really before the internet. And now it's like, it's an hourly newspaper. So you always get the chance to, things change and you react and all that.
Well,
the hard part about that would have been actually if it had happened, then how do you write the follow-up if you're already talking about it?
Right. And we just thought, well, we'll just deal with that when it comes, right?
That's journalism. Deal with it when it comes.
Yeah, you'll just figure it out. But I promise I'm not going to make my favorite thing about me in that way again. I'll try to.
Please don't ever.
I'll look outward like you did with the eggnog. You know what I mean? And the pretty bows.
Well, the eggnog went inward into me. So
and the pretty bows. So yeah. All right, my man. Well, it was fun. Great get with Robert. Wow, he's a good synthesizer, isn't he?
Oh yeah, he should have a career in like communications.
He should. I remember he was good when he'd get up in our newsroom and talk back when he was the editor of the Free Press,
Oh, yeah. If he could get me and my wife to travel to Toronto for a friendly game with Rich Johnson's buddies from what's the paper in Toronto? Not the Star, but the
oh yeah, he used to work there.
the
And
National.
by the way, Richard Johnson, who Robert mentioned earlier, was a graphic artist. Did the series called Portraits of War with our friend and colleague Jeff Seidel.
Yeah,
over in Iraq.
Great guy.
Yeah, and Richard is still doing just these striking, stunning portraits. He's still going out with the military. And I think he's been in Afghanistan. Yeah, I read not too long ago and saw some, maybe I saw a little video of some of his work, an interview with him, and it's incredible.
That's difficult, scary work, man.
Yeah, no, and we were lucky to have him. We were lucky to have Robert. Great guest today. Great get, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Kudos. I
appreciate it.
Yeah, the booking the talent is. Yeah, you should just take over that.
I'm going to be a producer. I want a producer credit.
All right. Well, let's see if we can do that. All right, man. I've appreciated it. We need to wrap this up and let these listeners get on with their lives. But we do want to thank the listeners for joining us once again. We also want to thank Carlos Menarez, a co-producer of this podcast, who's also the booking agent. Talent agent, I guess. Booking agent. I think that's right. We want to thank Kirkland Crawford, a co-producer, sports editor. We want to thank Anjanette
executive.
Delgado. Is he an executive?
He's an executive producer.
He's always just trying to. Oh my goodness! Well,
you forgot our producers first.
Oh. Well, you go ahead.
Well, our producers are Andrew Hammond and Robin Chan. And our co-executive producers are Kirkland Crawford. He's becoming the new Anjanette Delgado, getting so many mentions.
Yeah.
And Anjanette Delgado. And the big man, the big kahuna, Peter Bhatia.
The big kahuna. Do you always think of the burger in Pulp Fiction? Wasn't that called the big kahuna?
Wasn't it in Gidget? Didn't it come from Gidget too?
I don't know. I can't believe it. We're getting a little too punchy here, which is another line from Pulp Fiction. Forgive us. We also want to encourage you to, hey, wherever you find your favorite podcasts, you'll find us. Spotify, Apple. You can download and get your alerts on your phone. You can subscribe. Maybe on a laptop. I think people still do that if you want to, but it's much easier on your phone. And you plug it in your car, and when you're driving to buy some eggnog, you can just download and listen to us. And give us a rating, give us a shout, tell us what you think. We'd love it. We want to thank you again for listening. Any last words, Carlos?
Be nice to each other in this season.
Yeah, and pour a little bit of rum in somebody else's eggnog. I think that'd be nice.
I don't drink it with rum. I drink it straight, just normal, non-alcoholic.
Yeah, I drink it straight too. But yeah, I'm with you. Be kind, be nice, show some empathy, a little bit of grace, if you will. How about that?
Yes.
There you go. All right. Until next week, Carlos. We will return with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Shawn. Although it'll just be you and somebody else. It will not be me. I will be.
Oh no!
I will be off. How about that?
You won the lottery finally. Okay, great.
No. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, I'll see you the week after that, unless you're off that week. We actually might be.
We have to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something will be on next week.
Yeah, I will not be here next week, but I will be back at some point. How about that?
Good.
All right. Until then, we will see you. We'll see you soon.